Welcome back to Sleepy Tech Stories, where we explore the gentle side of technology's greatest tales. I'm your host, and if you're new here, this is a place where we slow down, breathe deeply, and discover how the innovations that shaped our world can also help us drift peacefully into sleep. Each week, we journey through history's most fascinating technological stories, told in a way that calms the mind and soothes the soul. From ancient inventions to modern marvels, we explore not just what was created, but how these creations changed the very fabric of human experience. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You wake up naturally as sunlight gently filters through your window. There's no jarring alarm, no frantic reaching for your phone to check the time. You simply wake up. Your body knows it's morning. Your mind is clear. There's no rushing, no anxiety about being late because, well, late for what? You stretch, you breathe, you listen to the birds outside. When you're hungry, you eat. When you're tired, you rest. When the sun sets, you wind down naturally. This isn't some fantasy retreat or vacation day. This was simply life for most of human history. Before the year 1280, no human being had ever been late to anything. Think about that for a moment. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived without the constant tick-tock soundtrack that now governs every moment of our existence. But then something changed. A mechanical heartbeat began to pulse through medieval monasteries, a simple invention that would eventually enslave humanity to schedules, transform our sleep, reshape our societies, and create the anxiety-inducing relationship with time that we all know so well today. Tonight, we're going to explore the invention of time itself. Not time as a cosmic force, but time as a technology, time as a master that we accidentally created and then willingly served. We'll journey from the peaceful rhythms of our ancestors to the relentless tick of atomic clocks, discovering how each technological leap changed not just how we measure time, but how we experience being human. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's travel back to when time had no master, and forward to understand how we might reclaim our natural rhythm in a world obsessed with precision. Imagine you're living in the year 1200. You're a farmer in medieval England, and your day begins not with an alarm clock, but with the gradual lightening of the sky. You don't check the time because there is no time to check. There are no clocks ticking in your cottage, no church bells chiming the hours. There's just you, the sun, and the natural rhythm of life. Your stomach tells you when to eat breakfast. The position of the sun tells you when to head to the fields. The length of shadows guides your work. When darkness falls, you naturally wind down, perhaps sharing stories by candlelight before sleep takes you. This isn't primitive living. This is human living, the way we evolved to exist for millennia. But even in this seemingly timeless world, humans were already beginning to wrestle with the concept of measuring time, and the technology they created was surprisingly sophisticated. Let's start with the sundial, one of humanity's first attempts to capture time in a device. Picture an ancient Egyptian priest around 3500 BCE placing a simple stick in the ground and watching its shadow move across the earth. This wasn't just casual observation. This was engineering. The sundial works on a beautiful principle. As the earth rotates, the sun appears to move across the sky, casting shadows at predictable angles. The technology behind a sundial is more complex than it appears. The gnomon, that's the technical term for the shadow casting stick, must be precisely angled to match the latitude of its location. Ancient engineers discovered that the gnomon should point toward the celestial North Pole, creating what we call a polar gnomon. This ensures that the shadow moves at a constant rate throughout the day. But sundials had limitations that reveal something profound about early humanity's relationship with time. They only worked when the sun was shining. Cloudy days meant no time. Nighttime meant no time. Winter days with short shadows meant imprecise time. In a way, time itself was subject to weather, to seasons, to the natural world. This led to another remarkable invention, the water clock, or clepsydra. Imagine ancient Greek engineers around 400 BCE, frustrated by the limitations of sundials, creating the first mechanical timekeeper. Water would drip at a steady rate from one container to another, and the water level would indicate the passage of time. The technology here is fascinating. These weren't simple buckets with holes. Advanced water clocks had complex gear systems, floats that rose with the water level, and even automated figures that would move to indicate different hours. The Tower of the Winds in Athens, built around 50 BCE, contained a sophisticated water clock with bronze gears and a rotating disc showing the hours. But perhaps the most remarkable ancient timing device was the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek coast. This bronze device, dating to around 100 BCE, is sometimes called the world's first analog computer. It used a complex system of gears to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. Imagine ancient Greek engineers creating a device so sophisticated that we didn't fully understand how it worked until the 21st century. The Antikythera mechanism reveals something beautiful about humanity's early relationship with time. It wasn't about controlling daily schedules or maximizing productivity. It was about understanding our place in the cosmic dance of celestial bodies. Time was connected to the heavens, to the eternal, to something larger than human concerns. Now, let's visit a medieval monastery around the year 1000 CE, because this is where our story takes a crucial turn. Picture Brother Thomas, a Benedictine monk, waking in his simple cell. His day is structured, but not by clocks. Instead, it's organized around the canonical hours, 7 prayer times that follow the natural rhythm of the day. Matins at dawn, prime at sunrise, terce at mid-morning, sext at noon, none in mid-afternoon, vespers at sunset, and compline before sleep. These weren't precise times measured in minutes and seconds. They were approximate periods that flowed with the seasons. In winter, the hours between prayers were shorter. In summer, they stretched longer. The monks used simple technology to mark these times. Water clocks, candle clocks that burned at predictable rates, and most importantly, their own biological rhythms. Brother Thomas could sense when it was time for the next prayer, not because a clock told him, but because his body, synchronized with the natural world, simply knew. But the monks had a problem. During the long winter nights, someone needed to wake the community for matins, the pre-dawn prayer. They couldn't rely on roosters or sunrise. They needed something more reliable. And so, in the scriptoriums and workshops of medieval monasteries, monks began tinkering with mechanical solutions. They experimented with alarm systems attached to water clocks. They created candle clocks with metal balls that would drop onto metal plates when the candle burned down to a certain point. They were engineering time, but still within the natural rhythm of monastic life. What's beautiful about this period is that time was still servant to human purpose, not master. The technology existed to help humans align with their spiritual and natural rhythms, not to override them. Time was measured, but it wasn't yet controlling. Think about your own relationship with natural time. When was the last time you woke up without an alarm? When did you last eat because you were hungry, rather than because it was lunchtime? When did you last go to sleep because you were tired, rather than because you had to wake up at a specific time the next morning? Our ancestors lived in what researchers call task-oriented time. You milked the cows until the milking was done. You harvested grain until the field was clear. You told stories until the stories were finished. There was no artificial deadline, no schedule to keep, no anxiety about being late. But change was coming. In the monasteries and cathedral workshops of medieval Europe, craftsmen were developing a technology that would fundamentally alter human consciousness. They were creating the first mechanical clocks, devices that would tick with relentless precision, marking time whether humans were paying attention or not. The age of natural time was ending. The age of mechanical time was about to begin. And with it would come a transformation so profound that we're still living with its consequences today. Every time we glance anxiously at our phones to check the time, every time we feel that familiar stress of running late, every time we sacrifice sleep to meet an artificial schedule. But before we enter that mechanical world, take a moment to remember this natural rhythm. Feel it in your body, even now, the natural heaviness of your eyelids as the day winds down, the way your mind naturally quiets as darkness falls. This is your inheritance from thousands of generations who lived by the rhythm of the sun. Picture this moment. It's a quiet morning in a medieval monastery, sometime around 1280. Brother Benedict is copying manuscripts in the scriptorium when suddenly he hears something that no human being in history has ever heard before. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It's the world's first mechanical clock, and its artificial heartbeat is about to change everything. Imagine being that first person to hear mechanical time. For Brother Benedict, this sound isn't comforting or familiar. It's alien, almost unsettling. Nature doesn't tick. Hearts don't tick. Rivers don't tick. But this machine does, with relentless, inhuman precision. And in that moment, humanity crosses a threshold from which we would never return. The technology behind this revolutionary sound is called the escapement mechanism, and it's one of the most ingenious inventions in human history. Let me paint you a picture of how it works, because understanding this mechanism is understanding how we became slaves to time. Imagine a wheel with teeth like a gear. This wheel wants to spin freely under the power of a falling weight, just like a yo-yo string unrolling. But there's a clever device called the escapement that literally escapes one tooth at a time, creating that tick-tock rhythm. The escapement has two pallets, like tiny paddles, that alternately catch and release the teeth of the wheel. Tick, one tooth escapes. Tock, the next tooth escapes. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Each escape represents a precise fraction of time, and suddenly, time itself has been divided into identical mechanical units. But here's what's truly remarkable about this technology. It's essentially a binary system, like the ones and zeros that run your computer today. The escapement is either engaged or disengaged, on or off, tick or tock. Medieval monks accidentally invented digital time 700 years before the digital age. The first mechanical clocks were massive, crude affairs. Picture a clock tower in a medieval cathedral, with weights the size of boulders hanging from thick ropes. The entire mechanism might fill a room, with wooden gears as large as wagon wheels. These weren't precision instruments. They might gain or lose 15 minutes in a day, but they were consistent in a way that water clocks and sundials never could be. And consistency, it turns out, changes everything. Let's visit the town of Salisbury, England, in 1386, where one of the world's oldest working mechanical clocks still ticks today. Imagine you're a medieval townsperson hearing the cathedral clock strike the hours for the first time. Before this moment, time was approximate, flexible, human. I'll meet you when the sun is halfway to noon. Come by after the evening meal. We'll start when everyone arrives. But now, suddenly, there's a mechanical voice calling out precise hours. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Time has become standardized, public, and most importantly, independent of human activity. This is where the story gets fascinating from a technological perspective. The early mechanical clocks used what's called a verge and foliot escapement. The verge is a vertical shaft with 2 pallets, and the foliot is a horizontal bar with adjustable weights. As the clock wheel tries to turn, it pushes against one pallet, which causes the foliot to oscillate back and forth. Think of it like a metronome, but instead of keeping musical time, it's keeping cosmic time. The foliot swings back and forth, and with each swing, it allows exactly 1 tooth of the clock wheel to escape. The rate of this oscillation determines the speed of the clock, and medieval clockmakers could adjust it by moving the weights on the foliot arms. But here's where the human story becomes poignant. These early clocks were so inaccurate that they only had our hands. Minutes weren't precise enough to matter. Can you imagine living in a world where time was measured only in hours, where being on time meant arriving sometime within a 60-minute window? There's something almost merciful about that imprecision. It left room for human flexibility, for the unexpected conversation, for the task that took longer than expected. But technology, as it always does, pushed toward greater precision. The breakthrough came with the pendulum, and we have Galileo Galilei to thank for this discovery. Picture young Galileo in the Cathedral of Pisa around 1581, bored during a long sermon, watching a lamp swing back and forth on its chain. He times the swings using his own pulse and makes a remarkable discovery. Regardless of how wide the swing, each oscillation takes exactly the same amount of time. This is called isochronism, and it's the principle that would make accurate timekeeping possible. A pendulum, Galileo realized, is nature's own metronome, unlike the crude foliot, which could be affected by temperature, wear, or adjustment. A pendulum of a given length will always swing at the same rate, governed by the laws of physics. But Galileo never built a pendulum clock. That honor goes to Christian Huygens, a Dutch scientist who in 1656 created the first pendulum clock. Imagine the precision revolution this represented. Suddenly, clocks could keep time to within minutes per day rather than hours. Picture a wealthy merchant in Amsterdam in 1660, proudly showing off his new Huygens pendulum clock to visitors. The steady swing of the pendulum, the precise tick-tock rhythm, the ornate wooden case. This isn't just a timekeeper, it's a status symbol, a technological marvel, a window into the future. But with this precision came something unexpected: anxiety. For the first time in human history, people could be precisely late before accurate clocks. If you arrived at a meeting around midday, that was acceptable. But now, if you arrived at 12:15 when you were expected at 12 o'clock, you were officially, measurably, undeniably late. The psychological impact of this shift cannot be overstated. Humans began to internalize mechanical time. We started to feel guilty about wasting time, anxious about running out of time, stressed about keeping up with time. Time transformed from a natural flow to a finite resource that could be spent, saved, or squandered. Let's visit a typical day in the life of Master William, a clockmaker in London around 1670. His day begins not with the sunrise, but with the chiming of his own clocks. He has internalized mechanical time so completely that he wakes at precisely the same hour each morning, not because his body tells him to, but because his clocks do. Master William's workshop is filled with the sounds of mechanical time, dozens of clocks ticking in slightly different rhythms, creating a symphony of temporal precision. He spends his days crafting escapements, adjusting pendulums, calibrating gear ratios. He has become a servant to the very technology he creates. But here's what's remarkable about Master William's world. Mechanical time is still largely confined to public spaces and wealthy homes. The average person still lives primarily by natural rhythms. Farmers still wake with the sun. Workers still labor from dawn to dusk. Families still gather for meals when hunger calls. The real transformation is happening in the cities, where church bells now ring not just for prayers, but for precise hours, where merchants schedule meetings for specific times, where the rhythm of urban life is increasingly synchronized to mechanical beats rather than natural cycles. And in the workshops and laboratories of Europe, inventors are pushing the boundaries of precision even further. They're experimenting with different escapement designs, with temperature compensation, with ways to make clocks smaller, more portable, more accurate. They don't yet realize it, but they're engineering a future where every human being will carry a timepiece more accurate than the finest cathedral clock, where we'll measure time not just in hours and minutes, but in seconds, milliseconds, nanoseconds, where the mechanical heartbeat that first echoed through medieval monasteries will become the relentless pulse of modern life. But that future is still centuries away. For now, in the late 1600s, mechanical time is still a novelty, still something to marvel at, rather than be enslaved by. The pendulum swings peacefully in Master William's workshop, marking time with gentle precision, not yet knowing that it's counting down to a world where time will become humanity's most demanding master. As you listen to this story, perhaps you can hear the echo of that first mechanical heartbeat in your own life, the tick of a wall clock, the buzz of your phone alarm, the digital display counting down the minutes. We are all descendants of Brother Benedict, all inheritors of that moment when humanity first heard artificial time. And like Brother Benedict, we're still learning to live with the consequences of that sound. Imagine reaching into your pocket and feeling the smooth, warm weight of a gold pocket watch. It's 1850, and you're a successful merchant in Victorian London. This isn't just a timepiece, it's a symbol of your status, your reliability, your mastery over time itself. But more than that, it's the first truly personal relationship any human has ever had with mechanical time. Picture the morning ritual. You wake in your comfortable townhouse, and before you even dress, you reach for your pocket watch on the bedside table. You wind it carefully, feeling the spring tension build under your fingers. You check the time against the mantel clock in your bedroom, making tiny adjustments to ensure perfect accuracy. This watch will be with you all day, its gentle tick a constant companion against your chest. And the technology that made this possible is a marvel of miniaturization that would challenge engineers for centuries. The massive weights that powered cathedral clocks obviously wouldn't work. Water clocks were impractical. Pendulums needed to hang vertically and swing freely. The solution came from a coiled steel spring, wound tight and slowly releasing its energy to power the clock mechanism. But here's where the engineering gets fascinating. A spring doesn't release energy at a constant rate like a falling weight does. When fully wound, it provides maximum power. As it unwinds, the power decreases. This would make the clock run fast when wound and slow as it runs down, completely useless for accurate timekeeping. Picture a cone-shaped pulley connected to the mainspring by a chain or cord. When the spring is fully wound and providing maximum power, the chain pulls on the narrow end of the cone, reducing the mechanical advantage. As the spring unwinds and weakens, the chain moves to the wider part of the cone, increasing the mechanical advantage. The result: constant power delivery and consistent timekeeping. The first portable timepieces appeared in the early 1500s, crafted by German clockmakers in Nuremberg. These weren't pocket watches as we know them. They were called clock watches and were about the size of a small alarm clock. Picture Peter Henlein, often credited as the inventor of the portable timepiece, working in his Nuremberg workshop around 1510, filing tiny gear teeth by hand, adjusting springs with primitive tools, creating miracles of miniaturization. But these early portable clocks had a problem that reveals something profound about the relationship between technology and human behavior. They were wildly inaccurate, often losing or gaining hours per day. Yet people bought them anyway, not because they needed precise time, but because they wanted to own time. The possession of a timepiece was more important than its accuracy. Think about that for a moment. Buying the idea of personal time mastery, buying a relationship with technology that didn't yet fully work. It's remarkably similar to how we buy the latest smartphones today, often for features we'll never use, simply because we want to be connected to the cutting edge of technology. The real breakthrough in portable timekeeping came with the balance wheel and hairspring, invented by Christian Huygens around 1675, instead of a pendulum, which needed gravity and stillness to work. The balance wheel could oscillate in any position. Picture a tiny wheel, perfectly balanced, spinning back and forth against the tension of a delicate spiral spring. This is where the technology becomes almost magical. The balance wheel and hairspring create what's called a harmonic oscillator, a system that naturally wants to vibrate at a specific frequency. Just like a tuning fork always produces the same musical note, a properly adjusted balance wheel will always oscillate at the same rate, regardless of the watch's position or the amount of power from the mainspring. The precision required to manufacture these components was extraordinary. The hairspring, thinner than human hair, had to be coiled with perfect uniformity. The balance wheel had to be machined to tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The gear trains had to be cut with teeth so small and precise that they required magnification to inspect. Widely considered the greatest watchmaker who ever lived, picture Brigid at his workbench, surrounded by tiny tools, working by candlelight to create timepieces of unprecedented accuracy and beauty. His hands, steady from decades of practice, file gear teeth that are barely visible to the naked eye. Each watch takes months to complete, and each is a unique work of art. He created the first wristwatch, made for the Queen of Naples in 1810. He developed shock protection systems, automatic winding mechanisms, and complications that could display the phases of the moon, the equation of time, and multiple time zones simultaneously. But here's what's remarkable about Breguet's era. These weren't mass-produced consumer goods. Each watch was handcrafted for a specific customer, often taking years to complete. Owning a fine watch was like owning a piece of sculpture, a mechanical poem, a testament to human ingenuity. Now, let's explore how pocket watches transform society in ways their inventors never imagined. Picture the expansion of the railroad system in the mid-1800s. Suddenly, for the first time in human history, people needed to coordinate activities across vast distances with split-second precision. A train leaving New York at 3 p.m. needed to arrive in Philadelphia at exactly the predicted time, or the entire system would collapse in chaos. This created what we now call railroad time. Every station master, every conductor, every engineer needed a watch accurate to within seconds. The railroad companies issued official timepieces to their employees, usually high-grade pocket watches made by companies like Hamilton, Elgin, or Waltham. These weren't luxury items. They were essential safety equipment. Imagine you're a railroad conductor in 1885, responsible for the lives of hundreds of passengers. Your pocket watch isn't just telling you the time. It's preventing train collisions, ensuring connections, maintaining the complex choreography of industrial transportation. The weight of that responsibility, literally ticking against your chest, must have been enormous. But the railroads created another problem that reveals how technology can reshape our understanding of reality itself. Different cities kept different local times based on the position of the sun. When it was noon in New York, it was 11:47 a.m. in Buffalo, 11:35 a.m. in Pittsburgh, and 11:18 a.m. in Columbus. For local communities, this made perfect sense. But for railroads operating across multiple cities, it was a nightmare. The solution was the creation of standardized time zones, implemented across the United States on November 18, 1883, a day known as the Day of Two Noons. Picture the chaos and confusion as communities across America suddenly had to reset their clocks to match railroad time rather than solar time. In some cities, people literally experienced two noons in a single day as they adjusted to the new system. This wasn't just a technical change, it was a philosophical revolution. For the first time in human history, artificial time took precedence over natural time. The sun's position became irrelevant. What mattered was what the railroad's master clock said, synchronized by telegraph signals from the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. The technology that made this possible was the telegraph, which could transmit time signals at the speed of light across vast distances. Picture telegraph operators in stations across the country, synchronizing their clocks to a master signal, creating the first networked time system in human history. This was the internet of the 19th century, connecting distant communities through invisible wires and shared temporal precision. But let's return to the personal story, because that's where the real transformation happened. Picture Margaret, a middle-class woman in Boston in 1890. She doesn't own a pocket watch. Those are still primarily men's accessories. But her husband's watch increasingly governs her daily routine. Breakfast must be ready when he checks his watch before leaving for work. Dinner must be prepared for his return at a specific time. Social calls are scheduled for precise hours rather than approximate times. Margaret's day is becoming synchronized to mechanical time in ways her grandmother never experienced. She's learning to feel guilty about being late, anxious about wasting time, pressured to be efficient and punctual. The gentle rhythms of domestic life are being replaced by the relentless tick of her husband's pocket watch. And in the workshops of Switzerland, America, and England, watchmakers are pushing the boundaries of miniaturization and precision even further. They're developing jeweled bearings, tiny synthetic rubies and sapphires that reduce friction in the gear trains. They're experimenting with different alloys for springs and balance wheels. They're creating complications that can track multiple time zones, phases of the moon, and even the equation of time, the difference between solar time and mechanical time. Each innovation makes watches more accurate, more reliable, more indispensable. But each innovation also tightens the grip of mechanical time on human consciousness. We're becoming a species that lives by the clock rather than by the sun, by artificial precision rather than natural rhythm. The pocket watch era represents a crucial transition in human history, the moment when time became personal, portable, and precise, when every individual could carry their own relationship with mechanical time, their own source of temporal anxiety, their own reminder of the relentless passage of seconds and minutes. As you listen to this story, perhaps you can feel the echo of that Victorian merchant's morning ritual in your own relationship with time. The way you check your phone first thing in the morning, the way you feel naked without your watch or smartphone, the way you've internalized the rhythm of artificial time so completely that you wake up minutes before your alarm. We are all descendants of those first pocket watch owners, all inheritors of that moment when time became intimate, personal, and inescapable. But suddenly, a piercing whistle cuts through the silence, then another and another. Across the industrial landscape, factory whistles are calling workers to begin their day, not when their bodies are ready, not when the sun rises, but when the machines demand it. This is the moment when mechanical time stopped being a convenience and became a master, when the gentle tick-tock of pocket watches gave way to the harsh command of industrial schedules. When humanity learned to march to the rhythm of steam engines and production quotas, the whistle at noon gives you exactly 30 minutes to eat. The whistle at 6 p.m. releases you, exhausted, into the evening. Your life has become synchronized to industrial time, and industrial time has no patience for human needs. But let's understand the technology that made this transformation possible, because it's more sophisticated than you might imagine. Those factory whistles weren't just loud noisemakers. They were precision instruments connected to master clocks, often synchronized by telegraph signals from distant observatories. Picture the steam-powered timing system. A master clock triggers a valve that releases steam through a carefully tuned whistle, creating a sound that can be heard for miles. The engineering behind industrial timekeeping was remarkable. Factory owners needed to coordinate the activities of hundreds or thousands of workers with split-second precision. A textile mill might have 50 different machines, each requiring workers to perform specific tasks at specific intervals. If one worker was late, if one process fell behind schedule, the entire production line could collapse. Picture a factory in Lowell, Massachusetts in 1850, where the entire production process is governed by a master clock connected to a network of bells, whistles, and mechanical signals. Workers don't think about time, they simply respond to the signals, like components in a vast machine. But the real innovation was the punch clock, invented by Willard Bundy in 1888. Picture this device, a mechanical clock connected to a time-stamping mechanism. Workers would insert a card into the machine, and it would print the exact time of their arrival or departure. For the first time in human history, human presence could be measured with mechanical precision. Think about the psychological impact of that first punch clock. Imagine you're a worker approaching that machine on your first day. You're no longer just Thomas the textile worker. You're employee number 247, and your value is measured not by the quality of your work or your dedication to the task, but by your ability to arrive at precisely the right moment and stay for precisely the right duration. The punch clock represents a fundamental shift in how humans relate to work and time. Before industrialization, work was task-oriented. A farmer milked cows until the milking was done. A craftsman worked on a piece until it was finished. A baker baked bread until there was enough for the day. Work had natural rhythms, natural stopping points, natural relationships to human needs, and seasonal cycles. But industrial work is time-oriented. You work for 8 hours, regardless of whether the task is finished. Your body's natural rhythms become irrelevant. What matters is synchronization with the machine. Let's visit the Pullman Company town outside Chicago. Picture an entire community designed around factory schedules. The houses are identical, arranged in neat rows. The company store opens and closes according to shift changes. Even the church services are scheduled around production needs. George Pullman, the town's founder, believed he was creating a utopia, a perfectly organized community where every aspect of life was optimized for efficiency and productivity. Workers would live in company housing, shop at company stores, attend company schools, and worship in company churches. Their entire existence would be synchronized to the rhythm of railroad car production. But the workers experienced this differently. Imagine living in a world where every aspect of your life, when you wake, when you eat, when you work, when you rest, when you socialize, is determined by someone else's schedule. Where your home, your job, your community, and your time all belong to the same master. This wasn't utopia. It was a kind of temporal prison. DC to master clocks in factories, railroad stations, and company towns across America. For the first time, a single source of time could govern activities from coast to coast. Being late wasn't just inconvenient, it was a character flaw. Wasting time wasn't just inefficient, it was sinful. Working slowly wasn't just unproductive, it was theft from your employer. Picture a typical worker education program from this era. New employees would be taught not just how to operate machines, but how to think about time. Time is money, they would learn. A minute saved is a penny earned. Punctuality is the politeness of princes. These weren't just practical guidelines. They were a new moral framework that redefined human value in terms of temporal efficiency. But the workers didn't accept this transformation passively. The history of labor organizing is largely a history of fighting for control over time. Picture the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, when workers across the country walked off their jobs, not just for better wages, but for more humane schedules. They were fighting for the right to work reasonable hours, to have time for family and rest, to maintain some connection to natural rhythms in an increasingly mechanized world. The 8-hour workday movement, which culminated in the Haymarket Affair of 1886, was fundamentally about time. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, the workers chanted. They were demanding not just shorter hours, but the right to control their own time, to have portions of their day that belonged to them rather than to their employers. Let's explore the technology of worker surveillance that emerged during this period, because it reveals how thoroughly industrial capitalism sought to control human time. The Bundy time clock evolved into increasingly sophisticated monitoring systems. Some factories installed multiple time clocks throughout the facility, requiring workers to punch in at different stations to prove they were actually working rather than resting. Picture the Waterbury Watch Company in Connecticut in 1890, where workers were required to punch time clocks every hour, creating a detailed record of their movements throughout the day. Supervisors could review these records to identify workers who took too long for breaks, who moved too slowly between tasks, who failed to maintain the precise rhythm demanded by industrial production. This wasn't just about productivity, it was about creating a new kind of human being, one whose internal clock was synchronized to mechanical time, whose sense of self-worth was tied to temporal efficiency, whose natural rhythms had been replaced by artificial schedules. The psychological impact of this transformation was profound. Workers began to experience what we now recognize as industrial anxiety, a constant sense of time pressure, a fear of being late, a guilt about rest or leisure. They internalized the factory whistle so completely that many would wake up minutes before it sounded, their bodies trained to anticipate the mechanical command. But perhaps the most significant change was in family life. Picture a working-class family in Pittsburgh in 1885. The father leaves for the steel mill before dawn and returns after dark, his day completely consumed by industrial schedules. The mother's day is structured around his schedule, preparing breakfast before he leaves, dinner when he returns, managing household tasks in the brief windows between his shifts. Children in these families grew up with a fundamentally different relationship to time than their grandparents had known. They learned to eat by the clock rather than by hunger, to sleep by the schedule rather than by tiredness, to play only during designated times rather than when the spirit moved them. The technology of industrial timekeeping was reshaping human consciousness at the most fundamental level. We were learning to think of time as a resource to be managed, rather than a natural flow to be experienced. We were developing what sociologists call time anxiety, a chronic sense that there's never enough time, that we're always running behind, that efficiency and speed are moral imperatives. And in the research laboratories and engineering workshops of the early 20th century, new technologies were being developed that would make industrial time control even more precise and pervasive. Frederick Winslow Taylor was conducting his famous time and motion studies, using stopwatches to measure human activities down to fractions of seconds. Henry Ford was developing assembly line techniques that would synchronize human movements to mechanical precision. They were creating a world where human beings would become components in vast temporal machines, where our natural rhythms would be completely subordinated to artificial schedules, where the factory whistle's harsh command would echo in every aspect of modern life. As you listen to this story, perhaps you can hear the echo of that industrial whistle in your own daily routine, the alarm that jolts you awake regardless of your sleep cycle, the schedule that governs your meals regardless of your hunger, the meetings that fragment your day into artificial segments, the constant pressure to be productive, efficient, on time. We are all descendants of those first industrial workers, all inheritors of that moment when human time became subordinate to machine time, when the gentle rhythms of natural life gave way to the relentless demands of industrial schedules. Picture this moment. It's 6 a.m., and you're jolted awake by a sound that didn't exist for 99.9% of human history. The alarm clock, that harsh, artificial noise that yanks you from deep sleep, from dreams, from the natural rhythm of rest that your body desperately needs. You reach over, hit the snooze button, and for 9 precious minutes, you drift back toward sleep. Then it happens again and again and again. This daily ritual, so familiar that we barely question it, represents one of the most profound disruptions of human biology in our species' history. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans woke naturally, with the sun, with their circadian rhythms, when their bodies had completed their necessary cycles of rest. But in the span of just a few generations, we've trained ourselves to wake on command, to override our biology in service of artificial schedules. Let's start with the technology itself, because the alarm clock is more ingenious than you might realize. The first mechanical alarm clocks appeared in the 1870s, and they were marvels of miniaturized engineering. Picture a standard wind-up clock, but with an additional mechanism, a separate spring-powered system that could be set to trigger at a specific time. Here's how it worked. You would set the alarm time by positioning a separate hand on the clock face. Inside the mechanism, this created a gap in a metal disc. When the regular timekeeping hands reached the alarm time, a lever would fall into this gap, releasing a spring-powered hammer that would strike a bell repeatedly until the spring wound down. The engineering challenge was significant. The alarm mechanism had to be completely separate from the timekeeping mechanism, yet perfectly synchronized with it. It needed enough power to create a sound loud enough to wake a sleeping person, but not so much that it would interfere with the clock's accuracy. And it had to be reliable. There's nothing worse than an alarm clock that fails to alarm. But let's step back and consider what this technology represented. For the first time in human history, we were creating devices specifically designed to interrupt our natural sleep cycles. Think about that for a moment. We were engineering awakening, mechanizing the transition from sleep to consciousness, turning one of the most fundamental biological processes into an artificial, scheduled event. Imagine you're a factory worker in Detroit in 1920, and you've just purchased your first alarm clock, perhaps a Big Ben model from Westclocks, one of the most popular brands of the era. Picture setting that alarm for 5:30 a.m., winding the mechanism, placing it on your bedside table. You're not just buying a timepiece, you're buying a new relationship with sleep, a new form of temporal discipline that will govern your rest as thoroughly as the factory whistle governs your work. The psychological impact of the alarm clock was immediate and profound. Sleep, which had always been a natural process governed by darkness, fatigue, and circadian rhythms, suddenly became something that had to be managed, scheduled, and interrupted. We began to think of sleep not as a natural state of being, but as time that could be lost or wasted. This created what sleep researchers now call social jet lag, the misalignment between our biological clocks and our social schedules. Picture your great-great-grandmother who went to sleep when darkness fell and woke when light returned. Her sleep was synchronized with her circadian rhythms, with the natural cycles that had governed human rest for millennia. Now picture yourself going to sleep at midnight because you have things to do, and waking at 6 a.m. because you have places to be, regardless of what your body actually needs. The technology of artificial awakening evolved rapidly. By the 1930s, electric alarm clocks were becoming common, offering more reliable timing and louder alarms. Picture the General Electric Telechron alarm clock, with its distinctive Art Deco design and electric motor that kept perfect time as long as the power stayed on. These weren't just functional devices. They were symbols of modern living, of technological progress, of humanity's mastery over natural rhythms. But with each technological advance, the tyranny of artificial time became more complete. Electric clocks didn't need to be wound, so they could run continuously, their red second hands sweeping around the dial in an endless reminder of time's passage. Radio alarm clocks, introduced in the 1940s, could wake you not just with bells or buzzers, but with music or news, making the transition from sleep to wakefulness seem more pleasant, while still maintaining the fundamental disruption of natural rhythms. Let's visit a typical American bedroom in 1955, because this is when alarm clocks became truly ubiquitous. Picture the scene: a suburban ranch house, a married couple's bedroom with matching nightstands, each topped with its own alarm clock. His is set for 6:30 a.m. for his commute to the office. Hers is set for 7 a.m. to prepare breakfast and get the children ready for school. Their sleep is no longer a shared natural rhythm, but a carefully orchestrated schedule designed to maximize productivity and efficiency. The children in this household are growing up with a fundamentally different relationship to sleep than any previous generation. They're learning that rest is something to be scheduled rather than experienced, that awakening is something that happens to you rather than something that emerges naturally from within. They're developing what psychologists now recognize as alarm anxiety. The stress of knowing that your sleep will be interrupted. The difficulty falling asleep when you know you'll be jolted awake. But the real transformation was happening in our understanding of time itself. The alarm clock taught us to think of sleep as dead time, hours that weren't productive, that didn't contribute to our goals, that were somehow less valuable than waking hours. We began to see sleep as an obstacle to overcome rather than a necessity to embrace. This attitude was reinforced by the emerging science of sleep research, which in the early 20th century was focused primarily on efficiency rather than health. Researchers were asking questions like, what's the minimum amount of sleep humans need to function, rather than how much sleep do humans need to thrive. The goal was optimization, not well-being. Picture the sleep laboratories of the 1920s and 1930s, where researchers were studying sleep deprivation, measuring how little rest people could get away with while still maintaining productivity. They were treating sleep like any other industrial process, something to be streamlined, minimized, made more efficient. The alarm clock was the perfect tool for this approach, allowing precise control over sleep duration, regardless of individual biological needs. The technology continued to evolve in ways that made artificial awakening even more intrusive. The snooze button, introduced in the 1950s, seemed like a merciful innovation, a way to ease the transition from sleep to wakefulness. But in reality, it created a new form of temporal torture. Picture the typical snooze cycle. You're awakened from deep sleep, allowed to drift back toward rest, then awakened again just as you're falling asleep. This fragmented awakening is actually more disruptive to your biology than a single, harsh alarm. Let's explore the physiology of what happens when an alarm clock wakes you. Your body goes through predictable sleep cycles, moving from light sleep to deep sleep to REM sleep and back again, roughly every 90 minutes. When you're awakened artificially, especially from deep sleep, your body experiences what researchers call sleep inertia, a period of grogginess, confusion, and impaired cognitive function that can last for hours. Picture your brain in the moments after an alarm clock wakes you. Your cortisol levels spike as your body responds to what it perceives as an emergency. Your heart rate increases, your blood pressure rises, your nervous system floods with stress hormones. This isn't a gentle transition from rest to wakefulness. It's a biological alarm response, repeated every single day. The long-term health consequences of this daily disruption are only now being understood. Chronic sleep disruption is linked to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, depression, and reduced immune function. We've created a technology that literally makes us sick, and we've made it so central to modern life that most people can't imagine living without it. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of alarm clock culture is how it's changed our relationship with our own bodies. We've learned to distrust our natural sleep patterns, to override our biological signals, to treat our need for rest as a weakness to be overcome rather than a wisdom to be honored. Picture a typical conversation about sleep in modern society. "I only need 5 hours of sleep," someone might boast, as if sleep were a luxury rather than a biological necessity. "I can function on coffee and willpower," as if artificial stimulation were superior to natural rest. We've created a culture that celebrates sleep deprivation, that treats exhaustion as a badge of honor, that sees the ability to ignore biological needs as a sign of strength. The digital age has made this tyranny even more complete. Picture your smartphone alarm with its ability to wake you with gradually increasing volume, with light therapy, with vibration patterns designed to be impossible to ignore. These devices can track your sleep cycles and wake you during lighter sleep phases, which seems more humane but still maintains the fundamental premise that artificial awakening is necessary and desirable. And now we have smart home systems that can coordinate your awakening with lighting, temperature, and even coffee brewing. Picture waking up in a bedroom where the lights gradually brighten. The thermostat adjusts the temperature, and your coffee maker starts brewing, all triggered by your alarm. This isn't just waking up. It's being processed through a system designed to optimize your transition from rest to productivity. But here's what's remarkable. Despite all this technology, despite all this optimization, despite all this control over our sleep and awakening, we're more tired than ever. We're experiencing epidemic levels of sleep disorders, chronic fatigue, and what researchers call tired but wired syndrome. The inability to rest even when we're exhausted. We've created the most sophisticated awakening technology in human history, and we've used it to make ourselves miserable. As you listen to this story, perhaps you can feel the weight of your own relationship with artificial awakening, the anxiety you feel when you realize you forgot to set your alarm, the grogginess that follows you through your morning routine, the way you've learned to distrust your body's natural rhythms in favor of mechanical precision. We are all descendants of those first alarm clock users, all inheritors of that moment when humanity decided that artificial awakening was more important than natural rest. When we chose mechanical time over biological time, when we began the daily ritual of violence against our own sleep. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax. Feel the weight of your body settling into whatever comfortable position you've found for listening to this story. Because now, after traveling through centuries of mechanical time, after exploring how humanity became enslaved to schedules and artificial rhythms, we're going to explore something different. We're going to talk about finding our way back home to the natural rhythms that still pulse within us, despite centuries of technological conditioning. Home to the wisdom of our bodies, despite decades of alarm clock tyranny. Home to a relationship with time that serves human flourishing rather than mechanical efficiency. But first, let's acknowledge something profound that happened in 2020. Picture the world in March of that year, as the COVID-19 pandemic forced billions of people into lockdown. Suddenly, for the first time in generations, millions of humans found themselves freed from commuter schedules, from office hours, from the relentless demands of industrial time. And something remarkable happened. People began to rediscover their natural rhythms. Imagine Sarah, a marketing executive in San Francisco, who for 15 years had set her alarm for 6 a.m. to catch the 7:15 train to her downtown office. Suddenly, working from home, she discovered that her body naturally wanted to wake up at 7:30 a.m. She found herself more alert, more creative, more energetic when she honored this natural rhythm rather than fighting against it. Or picture David, a teacher in Chicago, who had always struggled with the 7:30 a.m. school start time. During remote learning, he discovered that his mind was sharpest in the late morning and early afternoon. For the first time in his career, he could align his most demanding work with his natural energy cycles. These weren't isolated experiences. Sleep researchers documented a phenomenon they called social jet lag recovery during the pandemic. When freed from artificial schedules, people's sleep patterns naturally shifted toward alignment with their circadian rhythms. They slept longer, woke more naturally, and reported feeling more rested despite the stress and uncertainty of the global crisis. This reveals something crucial. Our natural rhythms haven't disappeared. They've been suppressed, overridden, ignored, but they're still there, waiting for us to remember how to listen. Let's explore the science of what we've lost and what we might reclaim. Your body contains what researchers call a master clock, a cluster of about 20,000 neurons. In your hypothalamus, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, this biological timekeeper has been evolving for millions of years, and it's exquisitely sensitive to natural light cycles, temperature changes, and other environmental cues. Picture this master clock as an ancient, wise conductor trying to orchestrate the symphony of your biological processes. It wants to release melatonin when darkness falls, to lower your body temperature during sleep, to increase cortisol levels in preparation for natural awakening. But every time you override these signals with artificial light, artificial awakening, artificial schedules, you're essentially telling this ancient conductor to ignore the music and follow a mechanical metronome instead. The result is what chronobiologists call circadian disruption, a state where your internal biological rhythms are constantly fighting against your external schedule. It's like trying to dance to two different songs at the same time. Your body becomes confused, stressed, unable to perform its natural functions optimally. But here's the hopeful part. This disruption is reversible. Your circadian rhythms are remarkably resilient and adaptive. Given the right conditions, they can realign with natural cycles relatively quickly. The question is, how do we create those conditions in a world still dominated by mechanical time? Let's start with light, because light is the most powerful synchronizer of human circadian rhythms. For millions of years, our ancestors experienced bright light during the day and complete darkness at night. This natural light cycle kept their biological clocks perfectly synchronized with the rotation of the Earth. Picture a typical day for your great-great-grandmother. She woke with the sunrise, worked in natural daylight, and as evening approached, the only light sources were candles or oil lamps, warm, dim light that didn't interfere with her body's natural preparation for sleep. Her melatonin production began naturally as darkness fell. Her body temperature dropped, and she drifted into sleep, aligned with her circadian rhythms. Now picture your own relationship with light. You might wake in darkness to artificial light, spend your day under fluorescent office lighting, and then expose yourself to bright blue light from screens right up until bedtime. Your poor circadian system is receiving confused signals all day long. It's no wonder that sleep disorders and circadian/disruption are epidemic in modern society. But we can work with our biology rather than against it. Imagine redesigning your daily light exposure to support your natural rhythms. Getting bright light exposure in the morning, even if it's from a light therapy device. Spending time outdoors during the day when possible. Dimming lights in the evening and avoiding screens for an hour or two before sleep. This isn't about returning to pre-industrial life. It's about using our understanding of circadian biology to create modern lifestyles that support rather than undermine our natural rhythms. Let's explore the concept of chronotypes, the natural variations in when different people feel most alert and energetic. Research has identified that people fall roughly into 3 categories: larks, morning people; owls, evening people; and third, birds, those in between. These aren't lifestyle choices or character traits. They're biological realities determined by genetics and age. Picture a world where we honored these natural differences instead of forcing everyone into the same artificial schedule. Where morning larks could start work early and finish early. Where evening owls could begin later and work into the evening. Where schools could offer different start times for different chronotypes. Some progressive companies and schools are already experimenting with this approach. Picture a tech company in Amsterdam that allows employees to choose their own work hours based on their natural energy cycles. Or a high school in Seattle that offers both early and late start times, allowing students to align their education with their biological rhythms. The results are remarkable. Increased productivity, better health outcomes, reduced stress, improved learning. When we work with our biology rather than against it, everyone benefits. But reclaiming natural rhythm isn't just about sleep and work schedules. It's about rediscovering what researchers call temporal sovereignty, the ability to make conscious choices about how we relate to time, rather than being unconsciously driven by mechanical schedules. Picture taking back control of your meal times. Instead of eating lunch at noon because that's when the clock says it's lunchtime, eating when you're actually hungry. Instead of forcing breakfast at 7 a.m. because you have to leave for work, perhaps eating your first meal when your body naturally wants food. Or imagine reclaiming your relationship with rest. Instead of scheduling relaxation for specific times, allowing yourself to rest when you feel tired. Instead of pushing through fatigue because it's not yet bedtime, honoring your body's signals for sleep. This doesn't mean abandoning all schedules or social coordination. It means becoming more conscious about when we choose to synchronize with external time and when we choose to honor internal time. It means developing what we might call temporal wisdom, the ability to navigate between mechanical time and biological time with intention and awareness. Let's explore some practical approaches to reclaiming natural rhythm in a mechanized world. One powerful practice is what researchers call light hygiene, being intentional about your exposure to light throughout the day. This might mean using a dawn simulation alarm clock that gradually increases light instead of jarring you awake with sound, or installing software that reduces blue light from your screens in the evening, or simply spending a few minutes outdoors each morning to reset your circadian clock. Another approach is schedule flexibility, building buffer time into your day so you're not constantly rushing from one artificial deadline to another. Picture having 15 minutes of unscheduled time between meetings so you can transition naturally rather than frantically, or leaving for appointments early enough that you can arrive calmly rather than anxiously checking the time. There's also the practice of temporal mindfulness, becoming aware of your natural energy cycles and working with them rather than against them. Notice when you feel most alert, most creative, most social. Notice when you naturally feel hungry, tired, restless. Begin to honor these signals rather than overriding them with artificial schedules. Some people are exploring more radical approaches to reclaiming natural time. Picture the growing movement of people who are choosing to live without alarm clocks, trusting their bodies to wake naturally and adjusting their schedules accordingly, or those who are practicing seasonal living, allowing their sleep and activity patterns to shift with the changing daylight hours throughout the year. These aren't necessarily practical options for everyone, but they point toward possibilities for a different relationship with time. They suggest that the tyranny of mechanical time isn't inevitable, that we can make conscious choices about how we want to live in relationship with both artificial and natural rhythms. The technology exists to support these choices. We have light therapy devices that can help reset circadian rhythms. We have sleep tracking technology that can help us understand our natural patterns. We have flexible work arrangements that can accommodate different chronotypes. We have the scientific knowledge to design lifestyles that support rather than undermine our biological rhythms. What we need is the wisdom to use these tools in service of human flourishing rather than mechanical efficiency. We need to remember that we are biological beings living in a technological world, not machines that happen to be made of flesh. As we come to the end of our journey through the history of time, perhaps you can feel something shifting in your own relationship with temporal rhythm. Maybe you're noticing the natural rise and fall of your energy as you listen. Maybe you're becoming aware of your body's signals for rest, for movement, for nourishment. This awareness is the beginning of temporal freedom, the recognition that you have choices about how you relate to time, that you don't have to be a slave to mechanical schedules, that you can honor both the practical necessities of modern life and the ancient wisdom of your biological rhythms. The invention of mechanical time was one of humanity's greatest achievements, but it was never meant to be our master. It was meant to be a tool, a servant, a way of coordinating human activity while still honoring human nature. Perhaps it's time to remember that distinction. Perhaps it's time to reclaim our natural rhythm while still appreciating the gifts of technological precision. Perhaps it's time to find our way back home to a relationship with time that serves life rather than diminishing it. The choice, as always, is ours. The time, as always, is now. And so we come to the end of our journey through time, or perhaps to the beginning of a new relationship with it. We've traveled from the gentle rhythms of our ancestors, who woke with the sun and slept with the stars, to the relentless tick of atomic clocks that measure time in billions of seconds. We've seen how a simple mechanical heartbeat in a medieval monastery grew into the complex temporal machinery that now governs every aspect of modern life. But here's what I hope you've discovered along the way. Time isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we participate in creating, moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. Right now, as you listen to these words, you're experiencing time in the most fundamental way possible, as a flowing present moment, unfolding naturally without the need for measurement or control. Your heart beats at its own rhythm. Your breath flows at its own pace. Your thoughts arise and pass away in their own time. This is the time that existed before clocks, and it's the time that will exist after our most sophisticated timepieces have crumbled to dust. It's the time that lives within you, that connects you to every human who has ever lived, that reminds you that beneath all our technological complexity, we remain biological beings embedded in natural rhythms. The story we've told tonight isn't really about the triumph of mechanical time over natural time. It's about the ongoing dance between these two ways of experiencing temporal reality. Sometimes we need the precision of clocks and schedules. Sometimes we need the wisdom of our bodies and the flow of natural cycles. The key is consciousness, the awareness that we have choices about how we relate to time, that we don't have to be unconscious slaves to mechanical rhythms, that we can honor both the practical necessities of coordination and the deeper needs of our biological nature. Perhaps, as you drift toward sleep tonight, you can feel both kinds of time operating within you. The measured time that brought you to this moment, that structured your day, that will wake you tomorrow, and the unmeasured time of your breathing, your heartbeat, your natural movement toward rest. Both are real, both are valuable, both are part of the full human experience of temporal existence. And perhaps, in that awareness, you can find a kind of peace with time that our ancestors knew and that we're still learning to remember. The peace of beings who live both within time and beyond it, who can use the tools of temporal measurement without being used by them, who can dance with both the tick of the clock and the rhythm of the heart. The invention of time was humanity's attempt to capture something uncapturable, to measure something unmeasurable, to control something ultimately beyond control. But in that very attempt, we discovered something profound about ourselves, our creativity, our ingenuity, our endless capacity to adapt and evolve. Now, as you settle into sleep, let yourself release the day's schedules and deadlines. Let your body find its natural rhythm. Let your mind drift beyond the boundaries of measured time into the timeless space of rest and dreams. Tomorrow, the clocks will tick again. The schedules will call. The mechanical world will make its demands. But tonight, you belong to natural time, to the ancient rhythm that connects you to every sleeping human across the centuries, to the gentle pulse of life itself. Sleep well, fellow traveler through time. Sleep in the knowledge that time, in all its forms, is ultimately in service of life, of consciousness, of the mysterious gift of being human in this vast temporal universe. The story of time continues, and you are both its author and its reader, its creator and its creation, its master and its student. Rest now in time's eternal embrace.